As part of our initial consultation, we also want and need to ask people about whether they are safe. This is simply a fundamental part of us caring for others. It is not often as people fear that they will then get sent to hospital or even sectioned under the Mental Health Act. That rarely happens. That's really a last resort. But it's important to ask the person about their safety in the broader sense. But part of this, of course, is possible moments of despair when people feel no other way than doing some self-harming behavior. And it's important to say that self-harming behavior is different from suicidal behavior. And I want to come back to that in a moment. And it is more frequent than we maybe like to think, that at times of distress, often overwhelming, emotionally overwhelming situations, people don't know anything else but to deal with such a situation by doing some self-harm. And I find this one of the most humbling moments in conversations. It's a very human connection, certainly from my experience, because it's quite some trust people grant us. And we are strangers after all in the first or second consultation, and to talk about something which is very personal, often even intimate in a way, is quite a token of trust. It is not easy to talk about this because of embarrassment, of shame, feeling guilty about it. So a very difficult step, a very vulnerable step for people to take. It's important to share it. It's important to know about it. And self-harming behavior is like probably any other behavior really, is in the service of what is called emotional regulation. So rather than shying away from asking people about it, which as a younger, at the beginning of one's career, professional, one has to learn to ask, because there's an instinctive perhaps shying away from certain questions which wouldn't be helpful. So it might sound like a sort of strange thing to say, but the question of, and when you feel that there's no other way than some self-harming behavior that might be maybe cutting oneself, burning oneself, hitting oneself, other behaviors, if the person sees it that way, could be coming under that umbrella, the binge of alcohol, the binge of substance misuse, putting myself in other ways into harm's way. But so asking the person, and when you do the self-harm, what is the benefit? Now, that might sound strange, but we humans, we certainly don't do things repetitively if there wasn't at least a perceived benefit, however short-lasting it may be. And inevitably, people answer something like, well, I feel so overwhelmed with emotions, it helps me to calm down. I replace my emotional pain with physical pain. Some people say, I feel so self-critical in certain moments that is a form of punishing myself, of being harsh with myself, and that actually calms down the emotion. There can be the opposite extreme. Sometimes people say, I find myself in moments which are emotionally stressful, but rather than feeling overwhelmed, I feel nothing. It's a strange void, it's a certain numbness, and my self-harming behavior helps me to reconnect, because these are dissociative states, that numbness, that not feeling anything. And so when I feel a physical sensation, then I can reconnect with my environment. And people go on about self-harm in different ways. For some, it's a very impulsive behavior born out of these crisis moments or difficult moments. Other people describe quite a methodological approach, quite a controlled approach, which in itself probably contains would otherwise feel so uncontainable. So I think that's really important to see. It is not anything, I don't know what the words might be, bad or crazy or abnormal. It is a behavior like most of our behaviors in the service of emotional regulation, that I come out of the storm. And it works. The difficulty is, how long is the benefit? Often, soon after, some people then do feel actually guilty about it. They feel, as I said earlier, embarrassed or shameful about it, and then it backfires. And of course, there are certain more obvious risks associated with this. I might, accidentally do more harm than intended. It might be physical harm. Wounds might get infected. It might be more serious harm that I need to go to A&E, that I need to get admitted. Occasionally, what is intended to be an emotional regulation purpose can really result in unintended consequences. So it's also important for us to ask with permission, because it's an invitational conversation, really, is, can you describe to me what you do, how you go on about it, where do you do it? So that's really important, but it's to understand the behavior. It might turn out not to be the ideal way forward. Often the person is not happy with that in a way. They wish they had another way of dealing with what is difficult. But it's understandable because there's a benefit, and whenever we perceive a benefit from any of our behaviors, it reinforces the behavior. So it's important to seek help. Sometimes it might be calling the Samaritans, calling a charity organization called Shout, which supports via text messages instantly available. Maybe one is aware of the crisis line in the area where one lives. Ideally, people also have perhaps a couple of friends or family members they can call every day or night, whenever, and then they would be there for them. And it's important to have these numbers in one's short dial, not to look in some crammed up drawer for a piece of paper when one is in a state like this, which is really difficult. As I mentioned earlier, I like to say this here, there is also quite a difference, and people usually know this and understand this, between self-harming behavior, which is really emotional regulation, opposed to feeling suicidal. There the intent is, should I finish my life because it has become so unbearable, I feel hopeless, and so rock bottom, that there's no way out. So it's the intention of the behavior that gives the direction. That's important. And coming to us, and in consultations, in a series of psychology or therapy sessions, we can often start by thinking about, what can I maybe do instead? It's all about, at the beginning, to buying a bit of time and maybe replacing the self-harming, potentially dangerous behavior with something that is less dangerous. So there are many ideas. They're subsumed under what is called grounding techniques. I usually send people a leaflet on that. People can pick and choose what they think. Oh, I try this, I try that. There might be relaxation techniques. There might be sort of self-care moments of people tell me, I take a bubble bath, I put on some music, I phone a friend, I go for a walk, I stroke my dog. To ideas like, instead of cutting myself, maybe I squeeze an ice cube. Now that might sound perhaps a little farcical in a way, but if you think about it, you squeeze an ice cube, it actually hurts, but it hurts without damaging the integrity of the skin. Some people use, I think a rubber band is quite a classic sort of idea. And I had actually someone in my clinic the other day who said this. They had a rubber band and they would flick it. And it sort of, it pulls your hair and it hurts a little, but again, it doesn't cause more damage than that. And it's worthwhile trying. It's not easy. One has to practice that, because the self-harming behavior had been powerfully enforced by the benefits. So, it's not, one can just not do it like a light switch. That's an important first step. And more often than not, it is then a question of finding a good psychological, psychotherapeutic setup that I can approach the situations that lie behind that I reach these moments.